So how does that shift actually happen? It starts with something uncomfortable. You have to examine what enough means to you because most people have never defined it. They operate with a vague sense that more is better, that upgrading is progress, that the next salary bump or the next purchase will finally produce the feeling of security they've been chasing. Without a clear definition of enough, you're on a treadmill with no finish line. Every raise gets absorbed. Every windfall disappears. The lifestyle expands to fill whatever container you give it, and you end up earning 3 times what you made a decade ago while feeling exactly the same amount of financial stress. Defining enough isn't about deprivation. It's about clarity. What does a genuinely good day look like? For you? Not an extravagant day, not a fantasy, just a Tuesday that you'd happily repeat for the rest of your life. How much does that day actually cost? When you answer that honestly, you'll discover that most of what you're spending money on has nothing to do with the life you actually want. It's maintenance on an image. It's keeping up with expectations that were never yours to begin with. It's buying things to signal a status that doesn't actually make your Tuesday any better. The moment you define enough, the target shrinks, and a smaller target is a reachable target. That's when financial freedom stops feeling like a fantasy and starts feeling like a project with a deadline. Here's something that connects directly to this. The greatest threat to your financial freedom isn't your income level, or your investment returns, or even your spending habits. It's comfort. Comfort is the silent killer of ambition. Not crisis, not hardship, not struggle. Comfort. When things are bad enough, people change. They have no choice. When things are good enough, people coast. They have just enough security to avoid desperation, just enough pleasure to avoid questioning anything, just enough progress to feel like they're moving forward even when they're standing still. This is where most people with decent jobs get trapped. Life isn't terrible. It's just not free. And because it's not terrible, there's no urgency to change it. The alarm never goes off, because the room never catches fire. It just gets slowly warmer, degree by degree, year by year, until you realize you've spent 2 decades in a place you never intended to stay. Breaking out of comfort requires manufacturing urgency that doesn't naturally exist. Some people do this by calculating the true cost of their current path. Not just the money they'll earn over 30 more years of employment, but the time, the mornings, the commutes, the meetings about meetings, the Sunday evenings spent dreading Monday. When you convert your current trajectory into hours of your life rather than dollars in your account, the math gets terrifying. That terror can be useful. It can become the energy that comfort was stealing from you. Now, most conversations about financial freedom focus heavily on what to cut from your life. Spend less here, eliminate that, downsize this. And yes, managing your outflow matters. But there's a concept that rarely gets discussed, and it changes the entire equation. You're probably optimizing the wrong variable. Expense reduction has a floor. You can only cut so much before you're living in a way that creates its own problems. Stress, deprivation, relationship strain. But income generation has no ceiling. And more importantly, the type of income you generate determines whether you're building toward freedom or just running faster on the same treadmill. Most people focus almost exclusively on the gap between what they earn and what they spend. That gap matters, but what matters far more is what you do with your time outside of earning and spending. The hours between dinner and sleep, the weekend mornings, the commute. Those hours are the raw material of your future, and most people burn them on consumption. Scrolling, streaming, browsing, absorbing content that was specifically designed to keep them consuming more content. Every hour spent consuming is an hour not spent creating. And creating is the only activity that builds assets. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket without requiring your ongoing presence. A piece of content that generates revenue. A product that sells while you're sleeping. A skill set so valuable that clients pay for outcomes rather than hours. A system that runs whether you show up on Tuesday or not. The shift from consumer to creator is the most important financial decision you'll ever make. And it has nothing to do with budgeting. Let me talk about something that trips up almost everyone who attempts this transition. You're going to spend a significant amount of time in what I call the invisible progress phase. This is the stretch where you're doing the work, building the skills, creating the assets, putting in the hours, and absolutely nothing visible is happening. No revenue, no audience, no validation, no evidence that any of this is going to work. This phase destroys people. It destroys them because we've been trained to expect linear results. At your job, you work a week, you get paid. The input and output are directly connected. When you're building something of your own, the input and output are disconnected by months or sometimes years. You plant seeds in January and nothing grows until October. And between January and October, every voice in your head and every person in your life is telling you the seeds were bad, the soil is wrong, you're wasting your time. Understanding that this phase is normal and necessary changes your relationship with it. Every successful person you admire went through an invisible progress phase where nobody was watching, nobody was paying, and nobody believed it would work. The difference between them and the people who gave up is simply that they kept working through the silence. They treated the invisible phase as tuition rather than evidence of failure. There's a practical dimension to this that most advice ignores. Your environment is either accelerating your progress or undermining it, and you probably haven't thought about it deliberately. I'm not just talking about the people around you, although that matters enormously. I'm talking about the physical and digital spaces you inhabit. What's on your phone's home screen? What notifications interrupt your focus? What does your workspace look like? What do you see first when you wake up? These seem like trivial details, but they're not. Every environment is an instruction set. Your living room is telling you to sit down and relax. Your phone is telling you to check and scroll. Your inbox is telling you to react and respond. If you never consciously design your environment, you'll spend your life following instructions written by other people for their benefit, not yours. The people who make dramatic progress tend to be obsessive about their environment. They delete apps that steal focus. They set up a workspace that signals, this is where creation happens. They arrange their mornings so the first hour belongs to their future rather than their inbox. They treat their attention as the most valuable resource they own. Because it is. You can always make more money. You can never make more attention. And attention is the raw material that gets converted into skills, which get converted into assets, which get converted into freedom. This connects to a broader point about how you should think about your own development. Financial freedom is not a single skill you acquire. It's a stack of skills that compound on top of each other over time. You need to understand how value is created and exchanged. You need communication skills to articulate that value to other people. You need enough technical literacy to build or oversee the systems that deliver value at scale. You need the emotional resilience to keep operating when results aren't visible yet. You need the judgment to distinguish between opportunities worth pursuing and distractions disguised as opportunities. No single course or book gives you this stack. It's assembled over years through deliberate practice and real-world experimentation. But here's the encouraging part. Each skill in the stack makes the others more powerful. Communication skills make your products easier to sell. Technical skills make your ideas easier to execute. Emotional resilience keeps you in the game long enough for the compounding to matter. The stack gets easier to build over time, not harder, because each new skill amplifies everything you've already learned. Something that almost nobody talks about in the financial freedom conversation is the role your body plays in all of this. Your health is the foundation that everything else sits on. Not in some abstract inspirational sense, but in a direct, practical, this determines your output sense. Sleep quality affects decision-making. Exercise affects energy and focus. Nutrition affects mood and cognitive function. Stress management affects your ability to think clearly under pressure. The people I've seen move fastest toward financial freedom tend to treat their physical health with the same seriousness they treat their finances. They protect their sleep because they know a tired brain makes terrible choices. They move their bodies because they know that physical energy translates directly to creative and productive energy. They manage stress because they know that chronic stress shrinks the part of the brain responsible for long-term thinking and planning. If you're trying to build your future on a foundation of poor sleep, no exercise, and constant stress, you're working against your own biology. The returns on investing in your health aren't just measured in years added to your lifespan. They're measured in the quality of every hour you spend working toward freedom. Let me address the relationship question because it's a real one that gets glossed over. The people closest to you will have opinions about your pursuit of financial freedom, and those opinions will shape your trajectory more than any strategy or tactic. If your partner isn't aligned with what you're building, you'll face resistance at home that makes everything 10 times harder. If your friends see your changing habits as a judgment on their lifestyle, social friction will drain energy you need for the work. If your family views your ambitions as unrealistic or selfish, their doubt becomes a weight you carry into every decision. This isn't about cutting people off or surrounding yourself exclusively with people who agree with you. It's about having honest conversations early, telling the people who matter what you're working toward and why. Explaining that the temporary discomfort has a purpose, asking for support even if they don't fully understand the path. Some relationships will strengthen through this process. The people who genuinely care about you will respect the intention even if they wouldn't make the same choices. Other relationships will reveal themselves as being built primarily on shared consumption, going out together, spending together, complaining together. And when you change those patterns, the foundation crumbles. That's painful but clarifying. Better to know now than to discover it. 5 years into a journey that requires real commitment. There's a mental model that changed how I think about all of this. And it's the idea that you're currently funding 2 lives simultaneously. There's the life you're living, the apartment, the car, the subscriptions, the routines, the daily experience of being you right now. And there's the life you're building, the future version, where your expenses are covered by assets you own and work you've chosen. Most people fund the first life generously and the second life with whatever scraps are left over. Then they wonder why the second life never materializes. Flipping that ratio, even partially, changes everything. What if the life you're building got funded first, and the life you're living got whatever remained? This isn't about suffering. It's about priority. Every dollar has 2 possible destinations. It can maintain your present or construct your future. When you see spending through that lens, decisions get simpler. Not easier, but simpler. That purchase isn't just $200. It's $200 that could have gone toward the thing that eventually makes you free. Sometimes the purchase is still worth it, but at least now, you're making the trade-off consciously rather than by default. I want to be honest about something that most content in this space avoids. The path to financial freedom involves genuine loss. You will lose time that could have been spent relaxing. You will lose experiences that your peers are having. You will lose the comfort of fitting in with the way everyone around you lives. You will lose the simplicity of not thinking about any of this, of just earning and spending and hoping it works out. Pretending these losses don't exist is dishonest, and it sets people up to quit the moment the loss feels real. But here's what you gain. You gain agency over your time, which is the only non-renewable resource you possess. You gain the ability to make decisions based on what you want rather than what you can afford. You gain the security of knowing that if your job disappeared tomorrow, you wouldn't spiral. You gain the rare and extraordinary experience of waking up on a random Wednesday and realizing that you are exactly where you want to be, doing exactly what you want to do, and nobody can take that from you. The losses are temporary and finite. The gains are permanent and compound. 3 to 7 years of intentional sacrifice creating decades of chosen freedom. That's the trade. And once you frame it that way, the question isn't whether the sacrifice is worth it. The question is whether you can afford not to make it. The last thing I'll say is this. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not filled with information. You already know more than enough to start. The gap is filled with decisions. Small, daily, unglamorous decisions that nobody sees and nobody applauds. The decision to spend an hour building instead of browsing. The decision to keep your old phone for another year. The decision to sit down and do the work when every part of you wants to do something easier. The decision to stay patient during the invisible phase, when quitting would feel like relief. These decisions are not dramatic. They don't make good stories at dinner parties. But stacked on top of each other, day after day, month after month, they create something that most people spend their whole lives wishing for and never build. You don't need a better strategy. You don't need more information. You don't need permission from anyone. You need to make the next decision well, and then the one after that, and then the one after that. The distance between thinking about financial freedom and living it is measured entirely in the decisions you haven't made yet. So make one, right now today, before this feeling fades, and the second tab goes back to the background. Make one decision that your future self will thank you for. Then wake up tomorrow and make another. That's the entire secret. It always has been.